I'm gonna be honest with you, I really don't know how to start this video off. Usually I try to start with some sort of semi-neutral starting point that can be used to quickly move the conversation toward the introduction of the main topic. However, I don't think there's really any clever way to introduce this video's star. I have received plenty of requests to look at the story of Daniel Larson, and I'm still kicking myself in the butt for having joined the Danderson train so late. But better late than never, right? At first I wanted to make a large, all-encompassing video covering his lengthy story and all of the greatest freakouts from him, but plenty of people have already put out long-form content on the topic and have covered essentially everything there is to say, not to mention that he is still very active online. Until his story slows down or comes to a close, it'd be difficult to give a full synopsis of everything. However, I think it'd be worthwhile to pick particular parts of his life, such as his hygiene and health, and focus solely on them to give a concise and researched explanation as to what the hell is actually going on with everyone's favorite transient. Today, we'll be looking into Daniel's declining health and lack of hygiene, a topic that surely won't be disgusting or depressing. Let's get right into it. If you click this video, you more than likely have a cursory knowledge of Daniel and his traits, notably his lack of a house. Daniel is currently homeless and likely will be for the foreseeable future, thanks to his increasingly erratic behavior. Due to his lack of housing, his access to running water is only in limited quantities, as he relies solely on commercial establishments or free drinking water that is available at parks or transit stations. His lack of water intake has undoubtedly been a contributing factor to his health, and we've seen how he's physically begun to falter. Overall, his diet is far less than acceptable. The only notable foods and drinks he seems to consume are macaroni and cheese, chips, like obviously nachos, candy, sugary drinks like soda and sports drinks, and absolutely no fruits or vegetables, or straight water. Everything that he eats is loaded up with sugar and salt, providing next to no nutritional value, if any at all. Despite having some access to water, such as purchasing a cheap bottle of drinking water or possibly bottling some from a nearby water fountain, he refuses to utilize any that he may come across for bathing. Granted, it would be hard to bathe using water limited to the capacity of a bottle. It would still be preferable than using absolutely nothing. He could, at the very least, wash his private areas, face, and his hair. Despite being a vagrant, Daniel has had some temporary housing that inevitably fell through due to his openly nonsensical behavior. This obviously further restricts his access to running water, cleaning products, and a toilet to properly crap in. During his limited stays at shelters and people's homes, he would often refuse to bathe. This has caused some trouble between him and his adoring audience, as they continue to encourage him to, at the bare minimum, stand under a running shower and let the grease get washed out of his hair. When fans finally pressured him enough, he got his belly full of the complaints and attempted to appease his legion of fans, but not actually by showering, thus not actually taking care of himself, but rather by recording himself near a shower where running water can be heard. Every time he's claimed to have bathed, he never appears to be wet afterward. Getting damp at the minimum is part of showering, unless I've been doing it wrong. I'll have to give that one more thought. When Daniel was living with Jonas, his former caretaker, Daniel was convinced to finally clean himself up. This bathing session, which happened on the 7th of July 2022, was the only evidence I could find of him bathing until November of 2023. There were likely a handful of times he bathed between those dates, but I also like to assume that it's just a yearly occurrence for him. Foul, but hilarious nonetheless. On May 23, 2023, Daniel shared that he hadn't bathed since 2022. Could it be from July of that year, or sooner than that? Either way, you know he stank bad, as opposed to stinking good. I really don't want to consider what that entails. Daniel livestreamed to YouTube on November 16, 2023, where he kept the camera face down so the viewers couldn't see anything going on. He turned on a bathtub faucet and let the water run for at least 33 minutes and 4 seconds. The duration could be longer as the water was already running as the stream had started. You know he didn't pay for that water, so it fell on whoever owned the property. He also didn't appear to have bathed either, so it was just a gigantic waste of time to prove nothing. After the water stopped running, the stream went mostly silent for the rest of its duration up until about the 42-minute mark, when Daniel can be heard reading nasty stream chat comments and conversing with the man who he alleged to be Bob, with the broadcast ending at about 55 minutes and 40 seconds.
What the fuck? He's just running the faucet. No, I'm not. What the fuck? New soap, no rag. Man, why is there so much fucking hate? Holy crap. Talking about a car horn. Taking a shower outside, what the fuck? Alrighty. Alrighty. Man, that was a good shower. Alrighty.
It's probable that Daniel has some sort of hydrophobia, or he just finds water to be an unpleasant sensation on his skin. This could be caused by autism, which appears to be a pervasive part of his personality that affects almost every facet of his life. Simply put, if he had less things affecting his head, this wouldn't be happening. But you really don't need me to tell you that. What bewilders me is how he seems to be totally fine with having dirt caked onto his skin, nestling deep into his pores. He also doesn't seem to mind having greasy hair. Seriously, that hair looks like you could grab some strands of it, wring it out like a washcloth, and save the oil that leaks out to fry some food with later. How does that not feel awful against his skin? Unless he likes that sort of thing. Another factor here is that Daniel is also incredibly lazy. I'm not saying this to be mean, but I'm just being honest. In his position, at his age, he should be in his prime. This is the point in his life where he should be carving out a nice slice of the world for himself in order to provide for his own well-being, and also to build the foundation for a healthy adult life. Instead of doing this, he's content fawning over a girl he's been chasing since she was underage, and because he also wants to chase a career in music. I'm not 100% sure on this, but I really doubt a singer-songwriter would go weeks without bathing. I don't recall seeing any dirty goblins on the red carpet while watching the boob tube. Actually, no, I take it back, they all are. Anyway, maybe I'm expecting too much from somebody who is severely suffering from mental illness. Oh well. On January 7th, 2024, Daniel finally elaborated as to why he refuses to bathe. He claims that because he only has one set of clothing and he has no home or way to clean them, that bathing would be redundant as his clothes are already filthy. I don't really get his logic here. I'd argue that doing something is better than nothing. Wash your fucking hair at least.
I don't have any other clothes. I would be putting on the same clothes, so I'm not going to shower if I put on the same clothes. And I'm not going to shower if I'm going to be right back out on the streets getting dirty. It makes no sense.
It's worth mentioning that because of his difficulty maintaining housing, he is eligible to stay at homeless shelters. In a situation where you do not have a house and you need a place to stay, given the circumstances, there is nothing wrong with utilizing the facilities available to you at a shelter. Daniel wastes this opportunity, as many shelters provide bathrooms for people to clean up and take care of their business. Despite this, he opts to not bathe. Instead, public bathrooms are more of a place for him to take care of himself in other ways. He uses them to sleep and masturbate. There, I said it. Figured I'd just rip the band-aid right off. Any bathroom he enters should be scrubbed thoroughly to remove any organic materials that he may have left behind. The filth that collected on his skin, and still does, built up enough and introduced yet another hazard for him in early 2023. At this time, Daniel reported having really itchy rashes on his skin, giving his bathing regimen this is to be expected. However, this happened while he was moseying around in California, not taking care of his hygiene, wearing the same clothes every single day, and sleeping in portable shitters at night. Yes, this man slept in stinky, revolting, filthy porta-potties. I think I'd rather sleep on a fucking curb. Turns out Daniel had, and I really wouldn't doubt if he still had this problem, a bad case of scabies. Scabies is an infection of small mites burrowing into the skin of a person or animal. He would often show off his rash in both live streams and videos, which of course was an incredibly foolish move on his part as he posed a risk for spreading the infection to other people who were unknowingly being subjected to his shit. Scabies can spread very easily, and when it does, it moves very fast. While Daniel was dealing with his newfound pets, he actually went down to Disneyland and rode a few rides and wandered around the park, undoubtedly spreading the infection to other people. Because of his diagnosis and idiotic oversharing, a Facebook post was made for Anaheim residents, letting people know that Daniel was walking around with mites in his skin, frequenting places like Disneyland and Panera Bread. The post had several photos of him in his self-taken scabies shots. Normally, I'd say that using this kind of method to incite normies to react is unnecessary, but then again, he was essentially committing bioterrorism by just walking around. He knew exactly what he was doing, plus he was taking photos of kids, and that needed to come to a stop anyway. He didn't need to go to places where children are present to begin with. Daniel tried to solve the infestation by seeking medical help only after his fans pressured him to do so. After he received a formal diagnosis for scabies and a prescription for expensive lotion, Daniel whined about the cost of the remedy. Stupid people unfortunately handed over the cash, for some reason deciding to help a vile pedo fork. And of course he just wasted the money on sweets from the Cheesecake Factory. Maybe people shouldn't give out cash so freely, Obviously, the itchiness persisted, only getting worse as time passed. Eventually, it became too much for him and he returned to the hospital, where a nurse gave him some ivermectin and cleaned him up with a washcloth. That poor, poor nurse. I'd quit on the spot if I had to handle him. And I'd argue that, out of all the people in the world who deserve to get a sponge bath from a nurse, Daniel is the least deserving. Because of the nurse's assistance, Daniel bid adieu to his buggy friends. It's likely he still has them or he will get scabies again in the future, so for any of you mouth-breathing idiots that actually want to make contact with them and intend to take a photo with the creep, perhaps decide against it. You're better than that, and you really don't want mites digging into your flesh.
Oh, so I was just given a pill to get rid of these scabies all over me. It was nice knowing you, friends. Now you're all dead. Nice knowing ya. Goodbye.
However, this was not the only time his lack of hygiene has negatively impacted his overall health. A lack of bathing and clean laundry can present a variety of different illnesses and health deficits. Daniel was hit by one particular one you likely wouldn't expect: trench foot. Don't worry, Daniel wasn't crawling around in the flooded trenches during a military skirmish, he was fighting the real battle, being a homeless, schizophrenic, freeloading degenerate. As we have all come to understand at this point, Daniel will go weeks to months without even doing as much as changing his clothes. He's constantly exposed to the elements such as moisture in the air, rain, snow, and everything else in between, not to mention his own sweat. As such, when his socks get soggy, it makes his skin prune up. He apparently wasn't aware that long-term exposure to moisture can do significant damage to one's skin, particularly feet. Trench foot features a variety of unpleasant symptoms such as pain, swelling, poor circulation, numbness, and even tingling or prickly sensations. If left untreated, the affected person may need to have the foot amputated or else they could die from sepsis. On August 4, 2022, once the pain was too much, Daniel sought out help from medical professionals. The doctors gave him a diagnosis of trench foot. He was told to get a hotel room and to keep off his feet for at least a month, but Daniel being Daniel and also being homeless, this wasn't going to be a feasible solution. Blood would leak from his tattered feet from time to time, building up enough to leave small puddles, droplets, or even smears on the floor as he would walk, as evidenced by footage he recorded himself. In April of 2023, Daniel claimed that the trench foot problem was still persisting, having miraculously returned to his life out of nowhere. Of course, he blamed the trolls for this because they were allegedly manipulating his funds. I'm sure that is the likeliest of scenarios. Daniel has claimed that because he wore the same moldy socks for months on end, his feet are black, smelly, and bleeding. If he didn't spend the money he received from donations on stupid crap like overpriced mac and cheese, he'd be able to afford a few pairs of socks. Hell, he's been seen at Walmart before, so he could have picked up a value pack of socks for far less than $20. But that would just make too much sense. His feet appear to be breaking down, as he shared images of what appears to be a possible fungal infection and a wound on his foot. If you're squeamish, I'd recommend looking away. Ooh, I don't think walking around with those stompers would feel very pleasant. Moving along, it should be abundantly clear as soon as you cast your eyes upon him, but Daniel has some dental problems. He lacks most of his teeth due to him suffering from hypodontia. Hypodontia is a condition where an afflicted individual is missing 1 to 6 teeth, excluding the third set of molars. According to Luke, one of Daniel's former managers, Daniel had all of his baby teeth, but most of them were never replaced by a second set, leaving him with a mangled maw. Luke did mention that Daniel only drinks soda and rarely brushes his teeth, if ever, but it's safe to assume that dental hygiene is the last self-grooming category he maintains. Daniel's missing teeth have affected his ability to eat, which might explain why he often goes for softer foods like macaroni and cheese, but then again, he's also been known to enjoy slices of pizza and bags of chips, so maybe he's just a trooper. I'd imagine harder food hurts his gums and the few teeth he's got, as they're likely to be riddled with cavities. His teeth have visibly yellowed, and I'm sure they've got to be at least somewhat sensitive. Soda is incredibly corrosive and can do some pretty harsh things to your teeth if you don't have any self-control and just guzzle it down. The acids in soda, plus the sugar combining with the already present bacteria in his mouth, wreaks havoc as he sips his third sody pop of the day. And it would appear that he doesn't understand how a toothbrush works, as at one point he jammed one up his poop chute and then proceeded to brush his pearly whites with it. How else was he gonna demonstrate his love for some underage girl on the internet? Or what he assumed they were anyway. If Daniel doesn't take time to clean his chompers, he's gonna lose the few he's still got left. He'll go from looking like a jack-o'-lantern to just having gums for a smile. I doubt children are going to find that very alluring. Not that they were drawn to him much anyway, despite his peculiar interest. It's also worth mentioning that during one of his autistic fits, he may end up knocking out his 2 front snaggle teeth when he hits himself right in his mouth. And he doesn't just hit himself once or twice, he goes in 5, 6, 15 times. He's actually got quite the tolerance for self-inflicted pain. I've had enough of talking about his nasty teeth, so let's move along, shall we? More often than not, Daniel appears to be quite sickly. There's plenty of videos of him with snot hanging out of his natural canopy that he refers to as his nose, almost making contact with the phone's camera. It could be that he has a weaker immune system due to him not having a consistent fulfilling sleep schedule, alongside the colder temperatures in his area making his nose run. Either way, it's a disgusting sight regardless of how you cut it. His nose is actually a major indicator of how he's currently doing. If there's snot hanging out of it bouncing around near his lips, he's sick. If it's covered in pus or peeled skin, he's been out in the sun for way too long. If it's bleeding, he either threw another one of his legendary temper tantrums or somebody put him in his place. It's safe to assume that if it is the latter, he probably had it coming. Historically, that has always been the case. When Daniel's nose had a large scab on it after getting smacked around by a disgruntled bodega employee, Daniel continued to draw attention to his injuries. He'd often pick at the wound, just what his viewers wanted to see. There are plenty of videos where you can see that the scab had been freshly picked, the red fluid glistening in the sunlight. Weirdly enough, the scab on his nose was remarked by trolls as strange, because the shape of it vaguely resembled the continent of Africa. At one point, Daniel was being bullied and he told his haters to go to Scab Africa.
So, if you guys have a problem with my scab, and you guys don't believe that I got attacked, and I fell on the pavement and scraped it, you guys could go back to Scab Africa.
I shouldn't have to explain this, but I'm sure one of you mouth breathers needs to hear it. Picking at scabs can slow down the healing process and lead to scars. He's very fortunate that his nose didn't turn out looking much worse than it already did to begin with. As of late, Daniel claims that he's pre-diabetic and that he may have heart issues and skin cancer. As with everything he says, we should take this with a grain of salt. However, the possibility of skin cancer is somewhat probable, given that he's outside more often than he's not, especially during the summertime. His skin has visibly weathered and aged at a much more drastic pace than somebody who has a home. As such, given that he looks like the sun has almost cooked him to a crisp, I'm willing to bet that if he doesn't currently have skin cancer, he most likely will get it in the future, if he happens to live long enough to see it anyway. Heart issues are another possibility, but there's no definitive way of telling. It could be that he has some kind of genetic predisposition, like it could run in his family, but it could also be his diet, as he tends to survive solely on junk food and sugary drinks, with the occasional meal from whatever restaurant he's swindling this week. Diabetes does seem like a possibility as well, given his aforementioned diet. It's hard to really discern if he's telling the truth or not, let alone if he's even aware of what actually is going on. For all we know, he could have been told one thing by the doctor and some trolls told him something else, leading to a conflicting story, or just one that's predicated on a bunch of nonsense spewed by his latest fake Grace. We've also caught him in plenty of lies before, so it's really hard to take anything he says at face value. All in all, Daniel is not a healthy person by any means. He does not bathe, nor does he care about himself enough to even acknowledge the filth that is built up on his skin and teeth. But then again, his own mental health doesn't seem to bother him either, so perhaps expecting him to take care of his own well-being in some capacity is an expectation too high for someone like him. He's not going to get any better, regardless if he finds some new temporary housing or something else. His story is ultimately going to end with him being absolutely filthy, though the end is still up for debate. My guess is he'll either finally succumb to weather conditions or his fluctuating health will bring forth his demise. That is, if he doesn't get locked up for his bullshit in the meantime. Either way, we can rest easy knowing that an evil degenerate like him is always going to face some sort of repercussion. His plot armor can be mind-boggling at times, but it doesn't always exempt him from karmic punishment. Hey, if he gets arrested and put into the system, he might be forced to bathe regularly, so he'll eventually have that going for him. But I got a sneaking suspicion that there aren't going to be any children giving him the light of day. And with that being said, that's going to be it for today's video. If you like what I do, leave a comment, rate, and subscribe. If you want to support me in a more personal way, you can check out the Patreon link and the Teespring link in the description. I've got more content coming down the pipeline. But until then, I'll see you degenerates next time.